Welcome back to Everyday Health for the Christian Woman. I'm Amber Swift and I'm your host, and I am so thrilled to have you join me here today. So, today's guest is someone that I have referenced quite a bit whenever I'm referring to my health journey. So, when my son was struggling, I knew deep inside that if I took him to our pediatrician, that the results would look much different than what I was desiring. Dr. Peter Petropoulos was the one who helped us get to the root of what was going on with our son. As we worked on healing our son, his symptoms became so much more manageable. What I didn't realize at the time was that I too was also carrying a hidden gut infection. And so through healing my gut infection, my headaches went away and my constant stomach pains disappeared. So, what I didn't realize, which is what so many of us don't realize, is that our children inherit our gut microbiome. And so, it is so imperative that we do take care of our symptoms at the root. So, this was what was so much fun is that my son began to thrive, I began to thrive, but my family also began to thrive because I was the cook, and so through changing our nutritional intake, so many symptoms that my husband and the other four children were struggling with began to go away. Symptoms like excess weight, heartburn, eczema, rashes, and the typical daily, not daily, but the typical childhood illnesses begin to disappear. It is amazing how when we begin to take care of our health from the root up, and we begin to also eat in a way that is like medicine to us, it is amazing how we begin to thrive. So, Dr. Peter Petropoulos also was the one that helped me recognize that my body was in chronic stress, that load that I had been carrying for years, a nervous system that was running hot, a desire to be all things to all people, and the desire to do everything with excellence, which isn't a bad desire, but we can only do so much with excellence. We can't do everything with excellence. And he taught me how to not ignore what was going on, but to pay attention to those symptoms, to ask why. Why am I having these symptoms? And to get to the root. And so much of what I learned through working with him has helped me in my work with the many, many clients that I see now, because he also, in the process, had become a mentor. And I am so excited to introduce to you Dr. Peter Petropoulos. But first, let me tell you a little bit about him. So at 17 years old, he began his journey in healthcare through the Navy Medical Corps, training in emergency medicine, trauma care, and acute interventions. After serving in the emergency room at Camp Lejeune and spending a decade in intensive care and cardiac monitoring, he saw firsthand both the strengths and the real limitations of conventional medicine, especially when it came to chronic illness. That realization set him on a different path, pursuing a doctorate in chiropractic and immersing himself in functional medicine, applied kinesiology, and acupuncture. Dr. Petropoulos, who we all call Dr. P, has spent over 4 decades helping people get underneath their health struggles to find out what's actually driving them. For the Christian woman looking for more than symptom management, his approach reflects a deeper truth. The body was designed by God to heal when it finally is given what it needs. His life work offers a powerful picture of what it means to pursue health in a way that honors both the body and the creator. And so I am just beyond thrilled for all of you to meet my mentor and the one who helped not only my immediate family, my children and my husband and I begin to thrive in our health, but also my parents and some of my siblings also. So without further ado, I am so thrilled to introduce to you Dr. Peter Petropoulos. Dr. P, thank you so much for being with me here today.
My pleasure. Been looking forward to it.
Yes, yes. So first, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I started my medical journey at 17 years old. I graduated from high school, found my aptitude in medicine in the Naval Medical Corps, worked
Mhm.
with the Marine Corps in Camp Lejeune for about 3 years, and then was in reserves for another 6. Started doing pre-med education, working in intensive care units and step down intensive care. And
Mhm.
in the end, decided that conventional medicine was not really what I wanted to pursue. So I changed courses, began to look at alternative medicine, and landed on chiropractic because they taught nutrition. I had no idea what chiropractic was,
Yeah.
but knew that
Yeah.
they would give me a nutritional education. And actually, the first day I went to chiropractic school, I still had no idea what they do.
Mhm.
But once I graduated from chiropractic school, I started studying with a guy named Jeff Bland, who's kind of the father of functional medicine. And ever since then, I've been kind of refining that functional medicine paradigm over the last 40 some odd years.
Wow. Oh, I love it. So I would love to know what was kind of the clincher for you to show you that you didn't want to go into conventional medicine? What was kind of
Well,
like that aha moment?
yeah, well, I was working in a cardiac intensive care, and a 40 some odd year old man came in and they did an angiogram on him, and he stroked out. Was basically hemiplegic after having his angiogram. And I said, there's got to be a better way to deal
Yeah.
with this than what I'm currently seeing. And I started to realize at the time that conventional medicine basically it wasn't healthcare, it was disease management.
Yes.
And I was really more into the idea that there must be a way to prevent disease rather than dealing with it after the fact. So that's really what my focus became.
I love it. And of course, I agree completely. So I would love to know what is maybe it's not the number one issue, but maybe an issue that most women come to you struggling with. What is that you see most often in your practice?
Well, I think especially among women, it's generalized fatigue, mood derangements, whether it be irritability, depression, anxiety,
Yes.
menstrual irregularity, perimenopausal and postmenopausal dysphoria, and just all the major symptoms surrounding those two events in a woman's life.
Hmm.
But it's usually around those types of things: lack of energy, mood dysregulation, pain etiology, and basically symptomatology. So, and most of it has to do with just their systems being worn out from
Yes.
chronic type A kinds of activities throughout their life.
Yes. You just described me 10 years ago, like
Yeah, right.
textbook.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
and so what do you like just back up a little bit. I would love to know what you see as the root cause of most of those symptoms that women come to you with.
Well, I call it disease and infirmity by a thousand cuts. It's a history that begins in childhood, and it usually has to do with either traumas or dysfunction within the family unit. It could even be just, being in a military family and moving every 2 years. That's a
Mhm.
trauma enough for a child, which
Mhm.
creates increased cortisol production the rest of a woman's life, or man, as far as that goes.
Mhm.
And then from there, you're you function within that high cortisol, that sympathetic dominance domain, and it leads inevitably to a breakdown at some point. And when that
Mhm.
occurs, usually 30s, early 40s,
Yep.
and it has to do with, children. How many children do you have? How have you managed that lifestyle? Mm, I always tell women there's back in the 60s, chronic fatigue syndrome was a thing, and now they call it post COVID, whatever. But
Mhm.
it was a syndrome that occurred after an influenza, and for some reason, following an influenza, a woman would no longer be able to function appropriately. They'd be fatigued. They'd have mood dysregulation. They were, have fibromyalgia, and they thought it was a mental illness because it always was in a certain type of woman. Type A personality, highly athletic, very, very driven, a professional woman. So they would, have been pushing all of their lives, then have this one incident of immune compromise, and then their body would break down. And I
Yeah.
call that the threshold breaking event. So,
Yes.
but it was 1,000 cuts prior to that threshold breaking event that led to their demise. And
Yes.
so that's what I see more often than not. It's not, we often see an event that seems to be the event that triggers what you're experiencing, but it's not that event that caused the problem. It was the 1,000 cuts prior that led to that threshold breaking event having that effect.
Completely. Yes. No, because I remember when my final event was I tried to do like some fancy detox that everybody else had, touted, and I had researched it, and it just like hit me and
Right.
I was a mess. But I remember you talking to me. You were just like, Amber, you've raised 5 kids, you and your husband started a church, you have toxicity in your family, on and on. And I was like, oh
Yep.
my gosh, you're so right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. No, and it is so true. So, do you see it in your practice more? Does it happen and it like just occur more with women that they just keep going? Or do you see it in men as just happening as often? Or is it more
No.
predominantly with
No,
women?
it's more predominantly women just because of the way women are designed. They carry more information. I was just showing the girls at the office this cartoon, and it was about this guy asking his mate, what's your greatest fear in life? And she says, a great white shark. And he goes, well, you never go near the water. And she goes, yeah. And he goes, well, that's never going to be an issue. And she goes, what's your fear? And he says, that I'm going to, one day we're going to be confronted. We're going to be out and we're going to be confronted with a danger. And I'm going to say, Amber, get in the car, and you're going to ask me why. Right? And then he goes on to say, he's going to say, I just want you to get in the car, and there's a danger, and you're going to ask me why. And she goes, well, that's fair. I need to ask you why. And then she goes to this litany of what kind of whys might be present in her mind. And he's just like, no, danger, car. It's as
Yeah.
simple as that. And that's the way men are. We're very, very
Ah,
linear.
yes.
Testosterone, Robert Sapolsky calls it the small molecule disease because it
Hmm.
narrows our focus. We're
Hmm.
designed to provide and protect. Peripheral information is lethal to us, right?
Hmm.
If we go out to
Yes.
kill the beast, if we have, if we go squirrel, we're dead, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Where you're going squirrel all the time, right? There's
Yes.
8 million things on your display at all times.
Yes.
Ours is compressed into one. Go kill the
Hmm.
beast, drag it back. That's it. So, being that you're designed to carry more information, you're going to have a lot, it require more energy for you to do anything, right?
Yes.
It,
Hmm.
it's it's just going to, because it requires a lot more detail orientation. You look at us and go, how do you walk into that room and not realize that needed to be picked up, or that, you know, that needed to be done? We don't see it. It's like invisible to us. In fact, there was another meme that showed, what a woman sees when she walks into the kitchen, just abject chaos. The guy walks in, it's perfectly clean.
It's so
Or
true.
the garbage can is spilling over onto the ground. We look at it, there's nothing in it.
Yes.
Right? That's the difference between men and women. So your design requires more energy than our design. And a lot of times women will say, "Wow, I wish I could just be like a man." Well, the world would be a pretty cluttered place if everybody was a man. So
Yes.
as it stands, a woman requires more energy to do what she does. And if you're given to dysfunction as a child, the amount of cortisol you're going to produce the rest of your life increases, thus increasing the amount of order and control that you require. Okay. But as you know, order and control is not easily had, right? I mean, it's
Not
like
at
the
all.
world is dropping shoes every day, right? You
Yes.
think you've got it all put together, and then all of a sudden the shoe drops. So if order and control is what you desire and the world doesn't give you that opportunity, at some point you're going to run out of gas, right? When
Yes.
is that going to be?
Yeah. No, it's so
right?
true, and it's
Yeah,
so often it's happening, like you said, in the late 30s, early 40s.
right.
That's what
Yeah.
I notice happening across the board with my clients, and that's
Well,
why they come to me.
that's exactly right. I mean, we start
Mhm.
to age at 20,
Yep.
right? And we're pretty bulletproof up into our early 30s. And then all of a sudden, you're not. Okay. You're not as
Yeah.
flexible. You're being overwhelmed. If you've had more than one child, you're going to be overwhelmed by the details because, especially a woman who's hypervigilant, the details of child rearing gets really onerous.
Mhm.
So it just at some point you're going to break.
Yes. Yes, no, it's so true. It's so true. So what would you encourage that woman who is hyper vigilant? What would you encourage her to do? Because sometimes it seems like I'm just made that way. So what would you like a practical step to not be so
Well,
hyper vigilant?
again, I always have people do journals, right?
Mhm.
You got to quantify what it is you do, right?
Yeah.
To me, that's the most important thing is begin to journal, begin to objectively look at your life, begin to quantify your emotions, look
Mhm.
at what it is you're doing and how it is you're feeling about it. Okay. That's important for a woman, especially. Uh, and then you've got to create margins. You
Yeah.
have to create margins. One of the things I tell, especially married women, to do is if you're ever asked to volunteer, always say, I need to go home, look at my calendar, and talk to my husband. Okay.
Yes.
Why? Because you need to remove yourself from the situation because a woman that's hypervigilant, a woman who's type A will almost always say yes
Yes.
immediately, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, because you feel compelled because it's a passion you have, right? And so you'll feel compelled to do it. But you
Mhm.
need to step away, you need to ask the linear husband, "What do you think?" And you need to look at your calendar to see that it's something that you can fit in without overwhelming yourself.
That's good.
More often than not, you need to say no. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, taking care of your children, taking care of your home, taking care of your husband. If you're a working mother, there's no room for anything else.
Mm-mm.
There's just no room for volunteering. And although you have had the capability to do so, it's not reasonable.
Yeah. No, and it's so funny, Dr. P, because I'm now wondering if you're the one that taught me that, because Mark
Yeah.
and I have done that forever. And I'm like, which leads me. So I want to ask you this question. So
Mhm.
you were the one that identified that I was in chronic stress, and you've already covered some of the practical life just habits that you
Yeah.
taught me. But
Yeah.
what else do you do with a woman who is in that state of just chronic stress? She's just always running. She's always just kind of on fire, it seems like. So, what did you do to help me get out of that, to pull my body out of that?
Okay. So think of it this way when the stress began in childhood, the
Hmm.
first thing that's deranged is digestion. Because when you're
Yes.
running from a lion, not time to eat, the body downregulates digestion. So the
Hmm.
primary locus of inflammation is going to be the gut, the GI
Yes.
tract. Okay. So, and then once the GI tract gets deranged, it will feed negative information to the brain through the vagus nerve. So
Hmm.
even if you try to calm your life and your gut is off, your gut is going to tell your brain it's not okay, right?
Yeah.
That danger still exists, that the environment's hostile. So the first thing you have to do is change gut ecology and digestive function. That's the first thing
Definitely.
you have to change. Then once you start to change that, you can begin to take control of emotional capabilities, emotional faculties, begin to create margins. Until then, your body's saying danger, danger, danger. It's going to make you stay OCD. It's
Yeah.
going to make, there's no getting out of it, right? You have to change the GI tract. You have to change the gut ecology in order for your brain to feel safe enough to take measures and do things to create margins.
Yes.
That's the key. If you
Yes.
don't do that, they're never getting out of it.
It's so true. And so often women they try to do it the opposite way. They
Right.
try to like, calm their body down and do all these things and say no, and but yet their body still feels like it's in danger because of the gut. And so
Yeah.
it's so true, because 10 years before you had told me I had chronic stress, I had come to you with my son, and we both had gut infections.
Yeah.
And it was amazing how, when you walked us through that, just cleaning everything up, like how my headaches went away and my stomach pains went away and his symptoms became more manageable. And so you really did help us with the gut. And then 10 years later, my collapse.
Right. 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 Yeah.
And do you see that often with women and moms, that kind of that progression happen and occur?
It's almost always that way. I mean, that's why in the 60s they thought it was a mental illness, because the archetype of that chronic fatigue fibromyalgia pattern was always within a certain archetype of women. And
Yeah.
and again, women to a much greater degree than men. Okay.
Yes.
And again,
Yes.
it's like Carolyn Leaf's book, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. She spends a lot of time in the beginning of the book talking about the neurology of chronic emotional instability. And
Hmm.
then, but she also talks about diet, right? Diet and lifestyle. And I think
Hmm.
it's important for people to realize so many people and so many women will go to therapy, for instance, right?
Yes.
And they'll be doing therapy and therapy and therapy and getting tools to try to manage their chronic emotional instability. But unless you take care of the gut, none of that will stick. It just will not stick, because you can tell your brain we're okay, we're okay, we're okay, but your gut's
Mhm.
going, no, we're not, no, we're not, no, we're not.
Yeah.
And so it keeps you stuck in that negative feedback loop.
It's so true, and that's when they get so discouraged. So
Right.
discouraged, like, "I'm trying everything. I guess this is just how I'm gonna be for the rest of my life,"
Totally. Exactly.
and then they start giving up.
Yeah.
And that's what I know you see that, I see that, but yes, no, just that importance of starting at the gut and then going everything
Right.
outwards and stuff
Right.
is so important. Okay,
Yeah.
so that leads me to my next question. So why do you think, because this is another area that women get so discouraged in, why do you think that it is increasingly difficult for women over 35 to lose weight? Why do you
Well,
think?
I mean, because chronic cortisol production augments thyroid function.
Mhm.
It augments digestion, so you'll have malnutrition. But
Yeah.
cortisol by nature increases centralized adiposity, weight gain around the midsection. But
Mhm.
high cortisol levels prevent T4 conversion to T3, which is
Right.
your most active form of thyroid.
Yes.
So these women, just by nature, and the stress that they incur, will not be able to lose weight until they begin to get back to the root causes of their progression.
Mhm. Yeah. No,
So,
definitely.
I mean, it's a huge problem, and I'll have people talk about it all the time. Calorie restriction doesn't work. Well, because calorie restriction means you're going to produce more cortisol.
Yes, it's so
Because
true.
when you fast, the only way your brain's going to get fed is by cortisol. So you're just increasing your cortisol level. So all this intermittent fasting stuff is counterintuitive for especially
Yes.
these women who have been chronically stressed.
It's so true. It's so true. No, because that is, I mean, it's amazing what I see. I mean, we see that over and over again because they
Yep.
try all of the different diets,
Yep.
and they're so frustrated. And instead of losing the weight, it goes up. So then they go
Yeah.
and they get the GLP-1 shot. So tell
Right.
me what
Yeah.
your thoughts are about that.
Well, basically, that's a band-aid again, right? You're not
Hmm.
really taking care of the underlying causes. And the number of abnormal functions that can occur because of GLP-1 is pretty phenomenal. And again, most people that do GLP-1, they're not looking at lifestyle change at all. So
Hmm.
what are you going to be stuck on that GLP-1 forever?
Yeah.
Because you failed to deal with the underlying causes and the
Hmm.
root issues that led to your, you know, uh, disease, whether it be obesity, type 2 diabetes, polycystic ovarian disease,
Hmm.
Hashimoto's thyroiditis, any of those things, they all start back in childhood dysfunction and childhood stressors.
It's so
So,
true.
and so again, they're not dealing with the underlying causes. They're putting a band aid on a system that is crying for help.
No, it's so true. No, it's so true, and then when they I mean, I'm very, very interested in the next few years to see what the backlash is going to be. I know it's gonna be huge
Oh, yeah.
because
Yeah.
oh my
No,
goodness,
it
yeah,
definitely will be. I mean, already you're seeing gastric paresis and
yeah,
all sorts of negative GI consequences. And
yeah,
really, what do? They just basically reduce your appetite, create nausea, right? I
yes,
mean, it's
yeah,
not a good situation. So you just don't
no,
feel like eating. So that
mhm,
does what for you, right?
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Just not going to eat as many carbohydrates, which may be of benefit to you. But
mhm.
again, it's not going to change your gut ecology.
That's so true. That's so true. Well, so then the next thing I see women do, so they, if they haven't tried the GLP-1 and they haven't tried all these other diets, is I would love to know they go to HRT. So I
Right.
would love to know your thoughts about that because there was a time where we were told that it was cancer causing, and
Right.
then now we're like full swing and more people are, going this route. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, okay, so I am not against, hormone replacement as long as
Mhm.
it's transdermal, that you're
Mhm.
not doing it orally or through pellets or things like that,
Mhm.
orally it's a steroid disrupting the gut ecology again.
Mhm.
But again, you need to have somebody that's going to monitor your hormone levels when they do this because as soon as you start introducing hormones into a system that's already dysregulated, it's going
Mhm.
to be whack-a-mole. And how many
Yeah.
women who go on hormone replacement therapy and now they're having thyroid dysfunction or they're
Mhm.
having weight gain or more mood dysregulation? It is something that you want to again first start with gut ecology. Okay, so
Yes.
you get the gut ecology normalized, and you're still seeing some things that could be related to hormone dysregulation. So I always tell women that when you go from ovarian hormone production premenopausally to adrenal hormone production postmenopausally, you have to make sure that the adrenals are functioning well enough to be able to handle that transition. And again, for most of these women, they've used up their adrenal glands premenopausally. Okay,
Yes.
so they've been, inordinately stressed most of their life, and so
Mhm.
their adrenal glands are fatigued. So you
Yes.
go to introduce hormones superficially through whatever route they're going to administer them. And then what's going to be the outcome? The body is trying to tell you if you're having perimenopausal symptoms that your adrenal glands aren't functioning well enough. So
Yes.
you need to be doing things to support the adrenal glands so that they can produce the hormones that they're supposed to produce postmenopausally. And doing that, your need for hormonal intervention should be greatly reduced. But a lot of these
Yes.
women are going and doing these pellets, okay?
Yes. Oh,
And once the
yes.
pellets are in, they're in. And if it's too much, you're in it for the long haul, okay? You got
Yes.
3 months of too many hormones. And again,
Yes.
hormones like estrogen replacement will change T3 conversion. So you have to be watching your thyroid levels when you're doing this and looking at whether or not the hormones are being taken up by sex hormone binding globulin. Are you seeing too much DHT production if you're using testosterone in the hormones you're getting? There's just so many things that need to be evaluated when you're doing hormone therapies that
Yes.
just really so many people just they get the pellets and they just run with it.
Yeah.
And then they get their blood tested and they're off the charts and they've got to wait until those pellets, dissolve before they can, do another set of pellets and then not know whether that's going to be too much or too
Yeah.
little. That's why I like
Yeah.
transdermal because you can moderate the amount of hormones going in just by increasing or decreasing the amount of cream you're using.
Yeah, no. Well, and it's just, listening to you, I'm just thinking about how it's almost like we have an epidemic of women who just feel miserable. I mean, they
Yeah,
just are it's continuous. It's like they struggled with their cycles when they were young women. They felt just stressed all the time. And then they
right,
go through menopause and they just feel like a wreck. And
right,
so just listening to you describe all of that because we were taught as young girls that like our body is, to be taken care of as these separate entities instead of just one and
right.
working to make sure that all systems work well together and flow well together.
Right.
But it really does seem to hit women the hardest
Yeah.
because, I mean, you go through all of your cycles, you're a young woman, and these women have horrible cycles, and then they have horrible pregnancies, and they're sick, not just morning sickness, all day sickness, and the whole
Right.
9 months. And then they,
Yeah.
so they just think that this is just who I am. My mom was like this, my sisters are like this. And
Mhm.
so, what do you say to that woman who comes to you and is like, well, this is just, this is, I guess, who I am because my mom and my sisters are like this. So, what
Right.
do you
Right.
say?
Well, I just we take a thorough history, and once we've done the history, it becomes clear. They start to have aha moments like, so if
Hmm.
you so say at 12 years old you start having your period and it's uncomfortable. What does that tell you? That you've
Yeah.
got too much inflammation in your system at 12 years old, right?
Yes.
So you look at what was the underlying causes of that. Well, I had chronic ear infections when I was an infant. Well, then you had antibiotics chronically. And my parents moved me, every couple years because I was in a military family. And that created stress. My parents got divorced when I was 8 years old, and I was going back and forth between households. Or I had sexual traumas, or they started me on birth control when I was 12. And then
Yeah.
that created more gut dysbiosis. And you start looking at it like a snowball just going downhill, just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Then they have their first child at 24 and their second child at 26. And by the time they hit their third child, their body's like, no more. Right. And so
Yes.
the inflammation really blooms after that. And their body starts to show signs of that chronic stress and the imbalances that it incurs. So,
Yeah.
I think that what has to happen is that the woman has to realize where the first cut started, how many cuts came along afterwards, what led to their total demise, really.
Hmm.
And then once they realize that, they can kind of sign up to start to unravel it, right?
Yeah.
Because that's really what it takes. We have to
It's
start
true.
from the beginning. We've got most often decades of
Hmm.
abnormal systemic stress that needs to be resolved. It's no small thing. It's not, oh, my last child and that was it. No,
Yeah.
there was decades that led to that last child being the, straw that broke the camel's back.
Definitely. Yeah, no, and I love how you talk about it as just unraveling it because of our mentality when it comes to our health. Most people think that, 1 month and I should be back to normal.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no. I clearly say in my paperwork it's a 2-year process
Yes.
minimum.
Yes.
Minimum, okay? And I have people that 5 years later are like, "Yo, wow, I didn't know what I was in for." How
Yeah.
many things they had to resolve, conflicts they had to resolve, dysfunctional relationships that they had to get rid of, just the different things in their life that were leading to, toxicity, toxic
Yes.
relationships, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just at some point you have to realize that, you know, hanging on to relationships that are toxic just are not gonna it's not gonna be okay.
Definitely. No, it's so true. It's so true. So, okay, so I wanted to ask you this question because I know that you incorporate traditional Chinese medicine
Uh-huh.
into how you work. So, how does that aspect, that modality help you get to kind of what's going on below the surface with your clients?
Well, I think everything that we implement has to do with stress reduction. I
Yes.
think that's really it. So, if a body's running in fight or flight, everything we do has to be directed towards reducing that. And
Hmm.
so the acupuncture, the Chinese medicine in my mind is about calming the central nervous system and doing as many different modalities as we can to make that happen.
Hmm.
So that's how we implement it. I mean,
Definitely.
like I said, when I got into chiropractic school, I had no idea what it was. And what I realized after I'd gone through chiropractic school and gone through my functional medicine training, that really what chiropractic was doing was reducing postural distortion related to systemic stress. And so when a person would get stressed, their body would distort. And then they'd go to the chiropractor and they'd reduce that distortion, but then go back and become stressed again and then have to go back and get corrected. And
Yes.
I began to realize if I deal with the underlying systemic stress, then the need for postural correction is greatly reduced. So
Yes.
if a person is taking care of their diet, managing their stressors, creating margins, getting massage therapy, doing things that help to reduce systemic stress, their need for correction is almost eliminated. So
I
the
agree.
need to go see your chiropractor 3 times a week or once a week is really not essential any longer because
Mhm.
you're keeping your body in balance. And when your
Oh,
body's in balance, it does not want to lock a distortion posture.
it's so true. No, I know because I think of people who like they're constantly like injuring a muscle.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It's because
Yeah.
of all the stress and the
Yeah.
inflammation they have
Yeah.
going on below the
Right. Yeah.
surface.
Yeah.
So, what is one thing that you wish more women, and you did cover this a little bit, but I would
Uh-huh.
love to ask this very specifically. What is one thing that you wish more women understood about their health?
Well, what they need to understand is they're different than men.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes,
Okay. Okay. That's the
so
biggest thing.
true.
I mean, our culture wants so much to make it seem like, that men and women are the same, and there is nothing about us
No.
that's the same, okay? We are men compartmentalized, women are on full display 24/7. Okay?
Hmm.
You can talk to us about a very serious uh situation in your life and then 1 week later ask us what you talked to us about and we're like, I don't remember anything because we'll have already compartmentalized it, locked it in a room, and closed the door. And it's always there for you. It's
Hmm.
up in front, right?
Yes,
And so making women understand the abject differences between how they function and how men function. And if you can understand that, then you begin to realize how you need to manage your life to deal with that absolute cacophony of
all the
information you
stuff.
have
Yeah.
every single day,
Hmm.
right?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
so
and
true.
and then you have to create margins so that you do not overwhelm your body's ability. And again, the problem is that women are so capable. And I don't want to
Yeah.
call it a problem, but it is a problem because it's about what's reasonable and what your ability is not about what's reasonable. You have this
Mhm.
high ability but you can overwhelm your system with what you're able to do versus what's reasonable to do. Okay.
Yes.
And so making women understand that your capability is great and your
Mhm.
ability to overwhelm that your system function is huge. And that's
Yeah.
why chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and autoimmune diseases are 12 to 1 in women over men because your
Yeah.
ability to overperform is much greater. I mean, men will be much more willing to say, "Yeah, I'm not doing that."
That's
Right?
true.
"Yeah, no,
Yeah.
not doing that." And you'll be like,
Uh-huh.
"Well, I feel compelled to do that."
I
Right?
feel
"I have
guilty.
to
That's
do
what it
that."
is. I feel
Yeah, right?
guilty and I should
Yeah,
do it.
right? Totally,
Yes.
totally. But you have to realize that's part of a woman's makeup. Your
Mhm.
makeup is such that you have a high level of passion for different things, like for your children and everything surrounding your children. And so you will feel compelled to do things for them.
Dr. P, thank you so much for being with me today. I appreciate everything that you shared and just appreciate what you're doing. Thank you. Wow, what a wonderful, wonderful conversation with Dr. P. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you found that you saw yourself in my story or in any of what Dr. P said, would you please leave a review because that enables us to reach more women and share it with a woman who you think could really, really benefit from this conversation. Share it, subscribe, hit the bell. We would love for you to continue on this journey with us. And if this episode just showed you that, wow, I really do need to get to the bottom of what my symptoms are saying, go ahead in the show notes. I left a link for you to set up a review with me. This review, we will go over what your symptoms are saying and get to what's behind those. Thank you so much for joining me and Dr. P in this conversation. And remember, Until next time, remember that health is a journey, but it is a journey worth taking.